Я хотел бы поговорить о таком маленьком, но абсолютно интригующем меня вопросе, как Майк, скажи, пожалуйста, какого хрена мы должны переводить названия наших собственных городов? Почему я должен говорить Moscow вместо Москва? Почему я должен говорить Тюмень вместо Тюмень? Это Тюмень и это Москва. Почему для них должны существовать в других языках переводы? Чем плохо их оригинальные названия?
So that's a complicated question. I mean, if I were a Tatar, I might ask you the same question. Why should I say Tunin as opposed to Tumen, which is the original Tatar name of the city, which was part of the Tatar Empire, but was taken over by the Ruskies in 1586? Have you
Кто
got an answer
захватил,
for
тот и
that?
придумывает имя. Таков закон.
Well, that's why the world pronounces everything in English. Thanks, British Empire.
No,
So jokes aside, what you're talking about in linguistics is called endonyms and exonyms. So X as in exterior, exit is outside, so an outside name, and an endonym is like an internal name, right? So Moskva would be an example of an endonym because it's the name of that place or of that it's not only cities, it could be anything, the name of that city in this situation, which is used by inhabitants of that place. And then an exonym would be Moscow, or to switch the languages around, an exonym in Russian would be Manchester, whereas we would say Manchester. That one's not quite as noticeable, I grant you, because it's only the stress which changes, not the actual name. But again, this question is kind of committing one of the errors which I talked about in the Technical Tuesday, about asking the question why in languages, and very often, I'm sorry, very often that question doesn't always have a very satisfying answer. Sometimes it's just that's how it is, and if you don't like it, well, sorry. But then to follow up on that, it is a matter of personal preference. There's no one stopping you from saying Moskva if you really want to. Will anyone understand you? Maybe people who speak Russian or who know a thing or two about Russia, I guess. But maybe that's the simplest answer to your question, so that people will understand you. What do you think?
Ну, просто это немножко как-то, возможно, как тут две стороны, знаешь, одной медали. Ну, или двойные стандарты. Почему некоторые понятия, вот как в одном из твоих выпусков технического вторника ты говорил о том, что...
So that's an example. That's an example of
Да,
an
да.
exonym. Технический вторник instead of Technical Tuesday or something. Yeah, that's a good example.
Да, то есть шашлыки, допустим, название блюд мы можем не переводить, то есть шашлыки, они в Африке шашлыки, но какого хрена надо переводить название городов? Это куда более фундаментальная штука, если говорить о той же Москва, как бы столица государства размером с 1/5 планеты, с 1/5 суши, и тем не менее это почему-то нужно переводить. Почему все страны не говорят Москва? Пусть с коверканием, но пусть видоизмененно, но не трансформируя это в полностью новое слово Moscow. Это большая разница между Moscow и Москва, как бы, согласись. Вот, то есть почему одно мы не переводим, а другое мы переводим?
Again, we're getting onto this fallacy that you keep asking the question why? Why isn't it like this? I mean, and you're basing this question why on the false assumption that there's some committee which decides this, like it was designed, not like it evolved, right? These customs and a lot of the time it's not like a set rule, it's just customs, it's traditions. So a good example of is at some point in the Russian language, right up until about the 19th or 20th century, it was customary when a word was borrowed from another language, if there was a h sound in that word, in Russian it would be rendered as a g. right? And as you know, the boundary between g and h is quite blurred, especially when you get down to like the Kuban Basin area. But anyway, that means that when you're talking about people's names like Harry in Russian to this day, even in modern Russian, we still say Gary. And if you talk about a city, you don't say Copenhagen, you say Copenhagen, right? Or Stockholm or whatever it is. But then once you get customs change and traditions change, and that custom is no longer true. That doesn't happen anymore in modern Russian. That's why we don't say Garly Davidson. We say Harley, right? We don't say Jimi Hendrix. We say Hendrix, right? So it's not like a set rule. There's not a committee that decides these things. It's just it happens all by itself, and there's a resulting mess of different customs and different structures and different traditions and translations and endonyms and exonyms. And then we've got you saying, why is it like this? Well, I don't know. That's just the way that it happened. It's almost entirely random, right?
У нас в таких случаях говорят, так исторически сложилось.
yeah, historically, так сложилось. Yeah. But there's another thread to your question here, another side to the question. There's also there's a political element to it as well. It could be, for example, some countries to this day still say Burma instead of Myanmar, right? The Russians still say Peking, which is the old name of Beijing, right? And I would also argue that in the same category of question is the debate over whether we say v or na Ukraine. At university, I was taught v. I don't know. How do you say it?
Ну, я знаю, почему нужно говорить в. Я говорю в, потому что на — это про острова на Кубе, на Курилах, на Сахалине. То есть вот на — это про острова. А когда ты говоришь про материки, ты должен говорить в. Вот, я это знаю, я всегда говорю в. Но я недавно этот вопрос обсуждал с своей мамой. Она говорит, что ну, просто как-то так исторически сложилось. То есть они говорили и так, и раньше это не было такой проблемой, но сейчас ввиду политизированности этого вопроса это очень часто как бы становится камнем преткновения, и очень многие...
Do you know why it happened like that, though? It's not just a coincidence. So where does the word Ukraine come from?
Понятия не имею.
On the edge.
Украine.
Exactly. Okay. And then what preposition would you use with that in Russian? На, right?
На окраине имеется в виду.
Exactly.
Ну да.
So that's why it's kind of a bone of contention, because what you're saying there is that kind of weirdly the name of the country basically means annex, which is kind of fucked up. So it's like a little conservatory. It's like Russia's sitting room, right? And fair, it's the same thing. If you go on Google Maps these days, you won't find the Czech Republic. Have you noticed that? You'll find in the English version of Google Maps it says Czechia. Isn't that pretty weird? And again, you can try and force these things. You can try by tech companies or government. You can try and force these issues. You can try and make people say Czechia instead of the Czech Republic. You can try and make people say v Ukraine instead of na Ukraine. You can try and make people say Las Malvinas instead of the Falkland Islands. But at the end of the day, language does what language wants to do.